Welcome to this explainer. Today we're looking way past the simple green exterior of the natural world, and we're going to explore the masterful biological skyscrapers hidden right inside. Usually, when we walk through a park or a garden, we just notice the shapes of the leaves or the colors of the flowers. But today, we're going entirely microscopic.
Let's kick things off by challenging ourselves to imagine the sheer complexity operating silently inside a seemingly simple stem. Just think about what it actually takes to pump water from deep underground all the way up to the highest canopy of a massive tree. It's completely defying gravity, all while capturing sunlight and churning out food. I mean, that requires some absolutely incredible engineering, right?
To really understand these marvels, we have to talk about plant anatomy. This is basically learning how to read the architectural blueprints of nature, how cells organize into tissues, and how those tissues build highly specialized organs. It's just like how a building relies on specific materials, concrete for the foundation, glass for the windows. Well, plants use perfectly adapted cells to survive and thrive. So here is our itinerary for today's microscopic tour. First, we'll look inside the plant body, then check out the 3 essential tissue systems. After that, we'll compare dicots versus monocots, and finally explore the organs. Roots as the foundation, stems as the support system, and leaves as the solar panels.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, inside the plant body, where we go from basic cells to biological skyscrapers. Which brings us nicely to our second stop, the 3 essential tissue systems. These are the fundamental building materials of our plant.
If you're building a skyscraper, you obviously need specialized materials. Plants do exactly this by organizing their cells into 3 main systems based on where they're located. First up is the epidermal tissue. That's the protective outer armor. Next, the ground tissue, which acts as the structural bulk and insulation. And finally, the vascular system, which is basically the complex internal plumbing that moves water and nutrients around. Let's break these down one by one.
Starting with the epidermal system. This forms the tough, waterproof outer layer of our plant building. It's usually just a single, continuous layer of tightly packed cells. And to keep water from leaking out, it literally wraps itself in a thick, waxy coating called the cuticle. It even uses specialized tools, like tiny unicellular root hairs down in the soil to absorb water, or little multicellular hairs on the stem called trichomes to block evaporation. Pretty smart, right?
Now check this out. Built right into that epidermal armor are stomata. Think of these as the building's breathing pores, regulating gas exchange and water loss in the leaves. The way they open and close is actually fascinating. They use 2 guard cells that, in most plants, are shaped like little kidney beans. But get this, if you look at grasses, those guard cells look exactly like tiny dumbbells. They possess chloroplasts and literally inflate and deflate to open and close the pore.
Moving a bit deeper, we hit the ground tissue. This is the structural bulk and insulation of our building. Basically, it's everything that isn't the outer armor or the internal plumbing. It packs the empty spaces inside the roots and stems with specialized simple tissues. Stuff like soft Parenchyma for filling, flexible Collenchyma, and super rigid Sclerenchyma for strong support. Depending on its location, this ground tissue handles vital jobs like storing food, providing structure, and even doing photosynthesis in the leaves.
Finally, we have the plumbing, the vascular system. Plants use specialized tissues called xylem and phloem to move water and food. But here's the really wild part. They use one of 2 blueprints, open or closed. Open vascular bundles have this special layer called cambium, which lets the pipes actually grow thicker over time. That's literally how trees get wider. Closed bundles, on the other hand, don't have this cambium layer, meaning their pipe size is permanently locked in from day one.
Now this whole open versus closed concept ties perfectly into our third section, dicots versus monocots. It's really a tale of 2 entirely different architectural styles. Let's see how these styles play out in the organs, starting with section 4, roots. This is the foundation anchoring our biological building. The baseline blueprint for a root foundation is incredible. It has an outermost layer called the epiblema, where those tiny root hairs live. Inside that is a massive, thick cortex of ground tissue. But the real magic, that happens at the innermost layer of the cortex, called the endodermis. It is heavily waterproofed by waxy materials called suberin, forming what's known as Casparian strips. This acts like a biological watertight seal, forcing every single drop of water to be filtered before it can enter the deep internal plumbing. When we put the 2 architectural styles against each other down in the roots, the differences are night and day. Dicot roots only have a few plumbing patches, maybe 2 to 4 xylem bundles, and a really tiny central core, or pith. But because they have that open blueprint we talked about earlier, they can undergo secondary growth and become massive, thick tree roots. Monocot roots, they have a huge, well-developed central pith, but they do not undergo secondary growth. They stay relatively thin their entire lives.
But hey, what monocot roots lacking with, they totally make up in sheer volume of plumbing. They use a setup called a polyarc system. This means they incredibly feature more than 6 distinct xylem plumbing bundles, heavily reinforcing their foundation from the inside out.
Moving up from the basement, we arrive at Section 5, stems, the central structural pillar of our plant. Now, the general stem design requires immense mechanical strength. To pull this off, stems reinforce their outer epidermal armor with a special sublayer called the hypodermis. This gives much-needed stiffness to young, growing pillars so they don't just snap in the wind. And deep inside, the innermost layer of the cortex is so packed with starch grains that it's often called the starch sheath, basically acting as a massive energy reserve.
If we take a horizontal slice of our stems, we see a major split between our two plant types. DICOT stems arranged our plumbing neatly in a perfect circular ring, which is a huge defining characteristic, along with a large central pith. Monocot stems, though, they completely ignore the ring design. Instead, they just scatter a huge number of bundled pipes all throughout the structural ground tissue, with the bundles on the outside actually being smaller than the ones in the center.
Finally, we've made it to the roof for Section 6, leaves. These are the plant's highly advanced solar panels, harnessing energy directly from the sun.
The core architectural design of these solar panels is basically a protective sandwich. You've got an upper and a lower skin of epidermis, covered in that waxy cuticle to prevent drying out. Sandwiched right in the middle is the mesophyll. This is the crucial ground tissue, heavily loaded with chloroplasts, where the actual magic of photosynthesis happens. And running right through this mesophyll are the vascular veins, pumping in water and carrying away the freshly made food.
Just like the stems and roots, leaf designs are drastically split. DICOT leaves, which are known as dorsiventral leaves, use a complex 2-layer system. You have tall, vertically arranged palisade cells on top to catch the sun, and loosely packed spongy cells underneath to let air flow through. Plus, their veins form a branching, net-like reticulate pattern. Monocot leaves, or isobilateral leaves, favor a much more uniform internal structure. Their mesophyll isn't layered, they have stomata breathing pores on both sides evenly, and their internal plumbing runs perfectly parallel, never intersecting.
Okay, I have to share this fascinating survival trick hidden inside monocot leaves, especially in grasses. They have these special epidermal cells along their veins called bulliform cells. You can think of them as hydraulic folding hinges. When the plant is well watered, these cells are full and rigid, keeping the leaf flat and open. But during a drought, they quickly lose water and deflate, acting as a physical hinge that forces the leaf to curl completely inward, hiding its surface to trap moisture and survive, literally folding itself up to stay alive.
Ultimately, all of this internal architecture, the open versus closed plumbing, the ringed versus scattered stems, the hydraulic leaf hinges, it all comes down to one core idea: adaptation. Plant anatomy isn't just a bunch of random microscopic patterns. These specific tissue choices are exactly what allows plants to adapt to and ultimately conquer almost every single diverse environment on Earth.
So I really hope this explainer has shifted your perspective on the quiet, seemingly stationary plants all around us. From their protective outer armor to breathing stomata, watertight roots, and sun-catching mesophyll, plants are truly masterful engineers. Next time you're outside, don't just look at the green exterior. Take a second to think. What invisible, microscopic architecture is operating right in front of you?